Friends, this is part 2 of the worship service for the fourth Sunday of Easter. Reading the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter. We're going to read the entire chapter, friends. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it, namely faith, the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith, we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. By faith, Abraham offered to God a sacrifice more excellent than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it he, being dead, still speaks. By faith, Enoch was translated so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had translated him to heaven. For before his translation he had this testimony that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, and prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world, and became heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would afterward receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he, namely Abraham, waited for the city which had foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith Sarah herself also received strength to conceive, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised it. Therefore from one man, and him as good as dead, was born as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promise, but having seen the promise afar off. They were assured of the promise, embraced the promise, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had the opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promise offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called," accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning the things to come. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and worshipped leaning on the top of his staff. By faith Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel, and gave instructions concerning his bones. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, he looked to the reward. By faith Moses forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith Moses kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians, attempting to do so, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. And by faith Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace. So, what shall we say then? For the time would fail to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and Jacob and Samuel and David and the prophets, who, through faith, subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others who were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trials and mockings and scourgings, yes, and chains and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. All of these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect here or apart from us. And so therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despised the shame, and has been seated down at the right hand of the throne of God. And consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls, because you have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. And so this magnificent section of the book of Hebrews, chapter 11 and chapter 12, encourages us to look to those great heroes and heroines of faith who have gone before us, and to be inspired by their courage and their fortitude in the face of tremendous odds, greater odds than you and I have ever yet faced, and may we never have to face those odds. But they persevered by faith, looking to Jesus, who was the pioneer and perfecter of their faith, and knowing that he who has promised to them the gift of eternal life would give to them that which he had promised. This is the epistle lesson. Friends, the gospel lesson for this, the fourth Sunday of Easter, appointed to be read in the churches, is the 21st chapter of St. John's Gospel, the 21st chapter of St. John's Gospel, the 15th verse. So, when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? Peter said to Jesus, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to Peter, Feed my lambs. Jesus said to him again a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. Jesus said to him a third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. Most assuredly I say to you, that when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish to go." This he spoke, signifying by what death Peter would glorify God. And when he had said these things, he said to him, "Follow me." Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper. And he said to him, "Lord, who is the one who betrays you?" Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, "But Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If I will that he," namely John, "should remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me." Friends, this is a wonderful passage, and I have to use a little bit of Greek here. I don't usually do that, but it's very important because in English we have love. I love books. I love sports. I love you. I love myself. All kinds of loves. But in the Greek language in which the Bible is written in the Hebrew language, we have variations on the word love designated by specific words. And one of those words is eros. Eros, from which we get the English word erotic, means sexual love, and it means erotic love. This is not in this passage. There is no eros in this passage. But there are two other significant words in the Greek language which are in this passage. The first one is phileo, from which you get the word philios, or like the town Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Brotherly love. Philios, brotherly love, to love you like a brother. But there's another word, agapao, from which you get the word agape. There's no easy English equivalent, but it means to love someone more than you love your own breath. Do you love me as you love your own breath? Am I breath to you? Am I breath to you? Would you, my friends, would you ever give up your breath? Would you say, to give up your breath is to give up your life. To say, I love you more than my own breath is to say, I love you more than my own self. I would gladly give up my life for you. So in this passage, we have the first section, verse 15. Jesus says to Simon Peter, "Son of Jonah, do you agapao me? Do you love me more than breath, your own breath?" And Peter answers him, "Yea, Lord, you know I phileo you. I love you as a brother. I love you as a brother." Jesus accepts that. And he says, "Feed my lambs." And think here of the threefold denial of Peter. Peter says, "I do not know the man. I do not know the man. I do not know the man." When Jesus is being led away to Pilate and the Sanhedrin and all of that. And so this is the time for Peter's redemption. So he says to him a second time, verse 16, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you agapao me? Do you love me more than breath, your own breath?" And Peter responds and says, "Yea, Lord, you know I phileo you. I phileo you. I love you like a brother." And Jesus says, "Tend my sheep." A third time in verse 17, Jesus says to Simon, son of Jonah, "Do you agapao me?" And Peter was grieved because Jesus asked him a third time. Peter, I believe, understood that the answer, "I phileo, I love you like a brother," was not what Jesus wanted to hear. Jesus wanted to hear, "Yea, Lord, I love you even more than my own life." Peter had not yet arrived at that level of devotion, and so he responds a third time. "Yea, Lord, you know that I phileo you. I love you like a brother." And Jesus accepts that and says, "Well, feed my sheep." But then Jesus gives a prophecy. "Most assuredly I say to you, Peter, when you were young, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, which is yet to come, when you are old, you will stretch out your hands in the form of a cross. You will stretch out your hands on a cross. And another will gird you, will tie you to that cross, and carry you where you do not wish to go, into death." And so the story is that at the end of Peter's life, he was leaving Rome because there was a great persecution in Rome. And